I like where we are, just overall, whether it's home or road. I think this team is balanced. Look, we like to win more home games, but right now we're focusing on the positive, and the positive for us is that we put ourselves in a position with our wins to set history, and that's the focus. And we got another couple games here that we want to take care of home court, like you said. It's important for us.
Willie Green, after the Pels drop a 119-112 decision to Oklahoma City at the Smoothie King Center on Tuesday night. That was the first of a 6-game homestand for the Pels. You heard Willie Green there say they'd like to win more home games. This is a team that's 44-28 overall in the year. There's 20-14 at home. So, yes, of course, you'd like to win more home games, and I don't know necessarily that it's going to matter tremendously because I don't know that the Pels are going to find themselves in any tiebreak scenario against OKC. But with that win, Oklahoma City did win the season series against the Pels 2-1. The Pels took the first one, and then Thunder took the last two. Our buddy Jake Madison from Locked On Pelicans, good enough to join us for a couple of minutes here, of course, on Twitter at NolaJake. Hey, man, how are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me on, Matt.
Man, it's always our pleasure. We appreciate some time. So, more concerning getting down 20 or more encouraged rallying the way they did in the second half?
Honestly, I think it's more encouraging the way they rallied in the second half. I thought they kind of lost their composure a little bit in the first half with some of the calls going against them. You saw Zion Williamson visibly frustrated. And in the past, this team would just kind of give up, right? You're playing one of the top teams in the West here who's been up at the top of the standings all season long. It's pretty easy to just chalk it up and say it's not your kind of night. They would have done that, I think, earlier on in the season. But to come out and then play the way they did from about the middle of the third quarter to about the middle or towards the end of the fourth quarter, they went on something like a 42-19 run against the Oklahoma City Thunder, a team that you just don't usually do that against. So to get back into the game and really give themselves a chance to win, I think going into the postseason shows that this team still has some flaws and things they need to figure out, particularly the final 5 minutes of that game. But it means they're at least a playoff competitive team, I think, and I think that's a good sign for a team that we don't expect to win the title this year and still has some room to grow. And if you really want to take a glass-half-full approach when you look at this, look, it's maybe better that they're not reaching their full potential yet. I know that sounds a little crazy here, but it just means they have room to grow and can get better. And you compare them to a team like the Sacramento Kings, who feels like they're topping out at the 6th seed while reaching their full potential. They don't have another year to get to. I'd rather take the Pelicans situation in that sort of thing.
Jake, I do want to talk the situation as a whole and some big picture stuff, but one more on the game itself last night. The Pels went up 112-107 with 3:11 to go, and then they didn't score again. They missed their final 5 shots. What did you see in those final 2 to 3 minutes that went poorly? Like, what stood out for you for New Orleans?
Oh, boy, right? There were a couple of things with that. I think the first one is Zion Williamson took one shot. I think in the entirety of the fourth quarter, he took 3, but in the final 3 minutes of the game, he took 1 shot. That's not okay, right? Like, to me, that's a team that wasn't ready for that moment, isn't well coached in those final 5 minutes, final 3 minutes of the game, which is, technically clutch time in the NBA. They need to figure that out. There's a reason this team is now 0-17 when trailing going into the fourth quarter. And Willie Green, the head coach, after the game talked about, well, we'll use this as a learning experience. Are you sure? Because you didn't learn it the 16 other times that it happened to be able to get this win. And I think that's kind of a concern, right? DJ McCollum, I think, was 2 of 8 in the fourth quarter. Zion Williamson was 1 of 3. Larry Nance Jr. took more shots than Zion Williamson did in the fourth quarter. You've just got to find a way to get him shot attempts. There were a couple of possessions where he doesn't touch the ball. If you're not getting your best player, a guy who's going to be in the running for All-NBA at the end of the season, more shot attempts or even a touch, you're doing something wrong, and that needs to change. Otherwise, you're not going to win these close games.
Yeah, Pels beginning a 6-game homestand. They got Milwaukee on Thursday. Make sure you're subscribed up to Locked On Pelicans, over get your podcast, or on YouTube. He's on Twitter at NolaJake. Do you have any information at all on Jose's injury? It was, for those that didn't see it, it almost looked like he got dead-legged. He was trying to walk it off, and then he just kind of dropped.
Yeah, he's listed officially as questionable for tomorrow's game against the Milwaukee Bucks. That was a really physical game for him. For the way the Pelicans like to play defense where they switch every sort of pick and roll, you saw him matched up with Chet Holmgren a number of times, and the height disparity between the two is like striking. And Jose Alvarado was also trying to box him out a lot by just throwing his body into the guy to see if he could just move him a little bit. To Jose's credit, he did a little bit of that. I don't think this is anything long-term that's going to be a big deal. I think it was just a very physical game, and he's a little bit sore and banged up from it. But I expect he'll play tomorrow night. That dude's tough.
What were your impressions watching the team at home without BI? What stood out as far as rotations, who stood up, shot attempts? What was the standout that was obvious to you?
Yeah, they miss him, right? I think you saw that particularly in the first half of the game and then in those final 5 minutes. I know, there have been people who are maybe excited to see what this team can do without Brandon Ingram. There's still a little bit of an open question, though I think that's been answered somewhat of can he and Zion Williamson coexist, and they wanted to see what this team could do without him. They missed his shot creation, right? When you looked at this team at the end of the game, it looked like they needed a point guard. Well, that's what Brandon Ingram plays for this team, particularly over the past month or so, where he's been more of a playmaker than a scorer for this team. And they needed someone who could get them organized, who could help them manufacture looks for Zion Williamson in the fourth quarter. I think when you see Trey Murphy stepping in for him, and you could say that these 6 games, this homestand and the rest of the regular season, as long as Brandon Ingram's out, is really big for Trey Murphy. If he was able to fill those holes, those big shoes, admirably well, do you maybe look at moving on from Brandon Ingram this offseason since you have a cheaper replacement in Trey Murphy there? But his defense hasn't been up to par. Brandon Ingram has been excellent so far this season. It shows they still miss him. They still need him. And if they want to make true noise in the postseason, they're going to need him. Trey's stepping up and making his 3-point shot attempts. That's a really good thing, but he's not the playmaker that Brandon Ingram is. And so when they have some of these stretches where the offense gets really stagnant, where the ball's not moving, that's where a guy like Brandon Ingram would truly help them right now.
A couple more for you. Maybe a thumbnail on Thursday night's game against the Bucks coming to the Smoothie King Center. What would you say are the keys and the things to watch on Thursday?
Look, it's Giannis, right? This is a team that just gives New Orleans a lot of trouble. They struggle against some of these very physical teams with a lot of length here, too. And so it's going to come down to Giannis, and, you'll see him guard Zion Williamson a lot. I'm going to wonder if maybe you'll see them use Jonas Valanciunas more than they did in this game against the Oklahoma City Thunder, where he didn't play at all in the second half. And I don't think that was the wrong decision, per se. But against a team with more height and a little bit more physical, I think you're going to need that kind of body out there to try and draw double teams, open things up like they did in the win over the Miami Heat. It's also going to come down to can you contain Damian Lillard, and New Orleans has a very good history of doing that too. So you throw Herb Jones on there, kind of take Lillard out of this game and make them a little bit more one-dimensional. I think New Orleans has a chance, but it's still a tough ask to get the win.
Jake, 10 games to go here in the regular season, and the Pels, the loss. They were briefly there in that 4 spot, but they drop a half game behind the Clippers. All right, 10 games to go. With what they have remaining on the schedule, with what you're looking at, give me what you think is a realistic best case.
It's tough to say. The schedule is kind of brutal. You have maybe 2 gimmies on this with a game against Portland and even the San Antonio Spurs, but Victor Wembanyama's there. He's going to be in the running for Defensive Player of the Year, I think. You're looking for them to go 500. It was nice to have the 4th seed for all of 24 hours here in New Orleans. Hang a banner for that one right there. And now you're kind of worried, could they fall into the play-in tournament? And I think the goal right now is finish with the 5 or worst case, the 6 seed. Home court advantage would be nice. Certainly, don't get me wrong, but I think this team matches up well with the Los Angeles Clippers no matter what. So 4 or 5, if that's the matchup, it doesn't truly matter in my opinion. It's avoid the play-in tournament where fluky things can really happen. That's the goal. I think if you play about 500, that's going to be what gets you there the rest of the way. So if you can play about 500 ball, 5-5 over these next 10, which is still a bit of a tough ask, you're going to be in a good spot going into the postseason.
He is Jake Madison, Locked On Pelicans. Make sure you're subscribed up on your favorite podcast app or on YouTube. Make sure you follow him on Twitter as well, @NolaJake. Hey, man, we always appreciate a couple of minutes. Thanks for making the time.
Of course, thanks for having me on.
Hey, thanks so much for watching. Please leave your comments. I love to interact, and be sure to hit the red subscribe button below.